everyone, welcome to my channel if you are new here, and if you are returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today's video is a Q&A video, so I asked you over on Instagram to go ahead and pop in whatever questions you had for me, and now I am going to answer them. I love doing these videos because I feel like it's a great way for us to connect with one another and learn more about each other. You get to learn about me and I get to learn about what questions you have, which is wonderful. So that is what we are going to be doing today. These questions pertain to research, my PhD journey through academia, stuff about myself and my life. So there's a little bit of everything here. So let's get started. So the first question right off the bat is, how long does it take to have a research proposal in good enough shape? Asking for a friend. That is a great question. It's not really the easiest one to answer because I think that there are so many different components to take into consideration when you're trying to set a timeline for yourself on a research proposal. If I'm reflecting on my own experience with my dissertation proposal, for instance, I would say that it probably took around 9 months from start to completion. So from the time that I started thinking about what I wanted to do for the dissertation to the time that I actually proposed it and had it approved by the committee, I think it was probably around 9 months. I think that depending on what area of research you're in, your timelines most likely look different too, depending on if you need to do a little bit of initial piloting before you can propose your dissertation or before you can present your research proposal. That might change the timeline too. And then also who you're working with, your collaborators, how much influence they have over your progression and over your timeline, if you have to sort of halt based on their feedback or if you're able to continue moving forward, right? So who you work with definitely impacts what your timeline is going to be in research as well. The next question is, your first year as a PhD, what was the procedure? Reading sources for getting info? Question mark. Great question. What the procedure is going to be for the first year of your PhD, I think is going to depend a lot on the program that you're in. So for my specific PhD program, we had a couple of mandatory requirements or milestones during our first year. So the first being we had to take a mandatory stats sequence. And in my program, this stats sequence took the place of qualifying exams. So I don't have qualifying exams in my program, but your first year you have to pass the stat sequence with an A in order to continue. That was kind of how it was presented when I was a first year. I think maybe some things have changed slightly since my PhD because I'm a fifth year now, but that's how it was for us at the time. So you had to do the stat sequence, and then you also had to do a first year project. The purpose of this project was to sort of spark your master's. So ideally, you would start with your first year project, and that would kind of be like experiment one of your master's, naturally lead into your master's. A lot of things happened in the world during the first year of my PhD. So for me personally, that first year project did not end up being my master's. I had to totally pivot to do online research. But that was sort of the goal of the first year project. And so you had to develop a research plan, collect data, analyze it, and put together a presentation with findings that we presented to the department. And so those were two big requirements for my first year. So because of that, yes, I was reading literature as it pertained to doing research for that first year project. I was doing the stat sequence among other courses. It was a lot. If I could go back, I would say that I wish I had implemented some sort of a healthy sort of reading habit, because that's one thing I feel like I could always have done more of throughout my PhD is read more literature, but I never really developed a set schedule for myself on when that would happen. I hope I've been focused this whole time, but we will find out. Okay, moving on to the next question. Will they still give me an offer when they know I have taken second attempt at my master's thesis? I think that when it comes to anything that you're concerned about when you're applying to a PhD program, so maybe you're concerned that you had to defend your master's twice or something like that because your first defense didn't go over that well. Maybe you're concerned about grades that you received in undergrad. There could be a whole host of concerns that you may have. I think that taking the time to reflect on your concerns and what you learned from those experiences, more specifically, is probably the best way to prepare yourself for any sort of questions you may receive in the interview process. I obviously can't say whether or not that program is going to not want to take you as a student because of that. But if the program isn't willing to even have a conversation with you about that concern and they just flat out reject you because of it, then you probably don't want to be there in the first place. And then second off, if they do ask you about that experience, just make sure that you've reflected on what you've learned from it. Why is it that you weren't prepared for your first defense, right? And do your best to kind of generate solutions that you can apply moving forward, more so than just like, oh, well, my advisor didn't help me prepare enough. Even though many of us may feel that way about certain experiences, it probably doesn't help to communicate what your individual strengths are. And so try to think about what your strengths are and highlight those in the response that you provide about why it is that you had to defend your master's twice. I don't think that is anything to be ashamed of. I'm sure that you've learned and grown from the experience. And so that's really all that matters. That's kind of the strength. That's the thing that you want to hold on to, more so than any sort of shame that you have associated with having to defend your master's twice. And you just want to make sure that you can communicate that to any sort of committee or faculty who might ask you about that experience. How to handle a tough professor who singles you out for criticism. This is a difficult one. So it's kind of unique being a PhD student because you are an adult who is interacting with other adults, and everyone has strong opinions and strong feelings about things. And it can feel very, very challenging, particularly early on in graduate school, when you feel like there are professors who maybe don't respect your opinion. Maybe you feel like they make you feel small in meetings or classroom settings. It's difficult. It's really difficult, and I definitely have been there. I think over the years, I have grown to be more confident in myself in a humble way, if that makes sense. So I think when you first start your PhD, I know for myself, I thought that I knew more than I think I know now. So the more I've learned, the less I feel like I know. It's important to maintain a sense of confidence, but it's also important to have room for growth. One key thing to remember is that if a professor makes you feel that way, they probably were made to feel that way too. And so they're interacting in the only way that they know how. And that's not an excuse for inappropriate interactions with professors that make you feel small or less than. But I think it is the reality a lot of the time. And so trying to learn not to take it to heart, not to catastrophize it. So it's not the end of the world. If a professor makes you feel that way, try to just move forward as best you can. Just move on with it. One day you'll look back on those experiences and wish that you didn't get so upset about them in the moment, because they don't really add to your learning experience. And so it's best to just let them go as soon as possible, in my opinion, and from my own experiences. I'm sorry, that's not a better answer. Okay. What motivated you to start a PhD? I love that question. I was fortunate enough to conduct research for multiple labs in undergrad. I had fantastic advisors who suggested that I go for a PhD as compared to just going for a terminal master's at the university that I was at. One of my advisors suggested that I apply to PhD programs on the East Coast. I was at San Francisco State University at the time and planning to apply to PhD programs on the West Coast. And he suggested, you should probably branch out to increase your chances of acceptance. He told me to go knock on doors, and I did. I applied to programs in the South and the East Coast. I booked a trip to come out and told people, hey, I will be at the university. I'd like to meet you. I'm interested in your work. I will say that if you are considering graduate school at all, considering a PhD, it's super important to have mentors in your life. And so seek those out any way that you can, even if it is through social media like this, through Instagram. If it's other PhD students that you can connect with, ask questions of. If it is faculty at your department, maybe previous students who have since graduated from your department, right? You can always reach out to researchers on LinkedIn. There's so many opportunities now to network with people, to learn about their experiences, and to gain a little bit of insight on what might be the best approach for you if you are interested in continuing on with your education after undergrad. I also highly recommend that you do get research experience before a PhD program. Not just because it strengthens your CV or anything like that, but because one of the most challenging aspects of doing a PhD is that it is highly independent. You really have to drive the work yourself. Day to day, you are on your own with a lot of things. And if you're constantly depending on an advisor to help you with experiment design, data analysis, presentation development, whatever it may be, it can really hold you back. And so if you have a little bit of baseline experience and knowledge, that can set you apart immensely and help you to progress on a reasonable timeline with your PhD. It also provides you with a little bit of flexibility when challenges come your way. It's just valuable to have some research experience under your belt so that you know how to kind of handle those roadblocks as they come along, because they always will. Continuing with that theme, how to cope when your PhD applications get rejected. So I definitely had PhD applications that were rejected. Ironically, getting back at kind of the story I was just telling, where I booked a trip and came out to the East Coast to visit programs, one of the programs that I was set to visit was Harvard. And I made a reel about this a little while ago and shared it on Instagram about the time that I got stood up by Harvard. But I was ultimately rejected from Harvard, and I had an appointment to meet with a faculty member there. I will not say any names, but it was all set up and planned, and they ended up ghosting me on the day of that meeting. So Harvard was one that I got rejected to, but I got rejected to several others also. Some I was waitlisted at. It was not all smooth sailing, and I think that that's something to expect, to be honest. PhD programs are highly competitive, and the fit has to be right. And so my advice to anyone who gets rejected from their dream program, because I did get rejected from what I thought was my dream program. It wasn't Harvard. It was actually a school on the West Coast that I had wanted to attend for many years. I thought that I was setting up my CV to be the perfect fit for this specific program, and I was rejected. And it was devastating at the time. But in retrospect, I am so thankful that they did not accept me. It was not the right fit. I don't think I would have been happy or successful there. And in retrospect, there were so many red flags during the interview that I completely ignored because I was heart set on this program. So, all of that said, if a program rejects you, trust them. Trust them that it was not the right fit. Trust them that it would not have worked out for the best. There is a better opportunity waiting for you that aligns more with what your goals are and what your path is meant to be, even if it means waiting and applying again the following cycle, or going to a school that you didn't initially see yourself at. Sometimes life doesn't turn out the way we expect it to, and that can actually be for the best. So if a program rejects you, it's okay. You're not alone. Take it as a sign that it just wasn't the right fit, and move on to whatever your next blessing is. How to handle peer comparison within your cohort and imposter syndrome. Great question. I think this is something that a lot of people deal with, is comparison, and there can be competitiveness within cohorts. Fortunately, I don't experience that within my cohort, and I'm so grateful for that. We're all very supportive of one another. I never feel like I'm competing with them. I think if you ever feel like you're comparing yourself with someone else, it's really a time to reflect on what your own strengths are and maybe whatever areas you have that you would like to grow in. So if you're super jealous that this person gives really strong presentations, maybe you need to practice your presentations a little bit more, right? Maybe you can learn from some of their approaches. Or if you feel like maybe someone has a better relationship with their advisor than you do. I know that can be really challenging as well. But just sort of having faith in your own experience and trusting that everyone's experience is different. And even when things look really great on the outside, it can be difficult inside. That's true for myself as well. It's natural to want to share the good things, and it's harder to be vulnerable and share the difficult things and to kind of face the judgment that lies out there for us. And so, you know, try not to compare, because you never really know what's going on with someone, even if it looks like they are making amazing progress with their degree, have a great relationship with their advisor. No issues at all. There are always issues when you take a look under the hood, right? So yeah, I would say to try to, you know, kind of reframe that a little bit and just allow yourself some insight on that perspective, that nothing is ever perfect, even when it seems to be. And so there's no point in comparing yourself to someone else, but we can always learn from one another. What are you planning to do after finishing your PhD? Great question. I don't know, to be honest. I'm really open to opportunities. That's kind of what I always say whenever someone asks. So I'm remaining open to everything. I'm remaining open to postdocs, professorships, industry positions, working independently for myself. I really want to write books. That still is my primary goal. And so I think that is probably one of the first directions that I'm going to take once I finish and things open up a little bit, because I'm no longer working on the present studies or manuscripts. So I would say continuing to write, continuing to connect, and continuing to grow. I've been doing a little bit of independent writing consulting on the side, so helping review applications that people have for graduate school, and I absolutely love doing that. It's something that I want to continue doing and to open up to a more broad audience, so not just people applying for graduate school, but just anyone who is developing written materials, developing presentations. I would really like to work in some sort of an independent consulting space where I'm able to help people with those things. And the last question I'll answer is, are you open to making friends in real life who follow you? Absolutely. First of all, anyone who interacts with me on Instagram, I already consider you to be one of my friends. And I'm always open to making friends with people through social media. Something that you may or may not know about me is that I moved around a lot growing up. And so for most of my life, I have kind of managed and maintained close friendships through social media, because I moved around so much and that's how I stayed in contact with people. I was born in Los Angeles, moved around at different homes there, spent a minute in Palmdale for one summer before moving to Las Vegas, which is where I lived for 4th through 6th grade. Then we moved to a small town in Northern California called Redding, which is in Shasta County. Lived there for a year and a half before moving to Huntington Beach, which is where I did my second half of 8th grade and all of high school. Then when I finished high school, I moved to San Francisco for undergrad, lived there for 6 years, and then my fiance and I moved to Boston, which is where we are now. We're just outside of Boston, both here for graduate school. He completed his doctorate in optometry, so he is an eye doctor now, and I am currently completing my doctorate in psychology. So to this day, I'm really close friends with people on social media that I haven't seen for 20 years in person, but that's how I've maintained my friendships. So I'm always open to connecting with you, and I love when you do pop in questions for me, or you send me DMs or leave comments, because it makes me feel like we are connected, which I love, and that's what I really strive for, is to feel like we have this community with one another where we can support each other and help each other along on our own journeys. So absolutely, I would love to be friends with you. I am so thankful to have you all here. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe. That really helps me out. It gives me feedback so I can know more of what you're looking for with this channel. I have laundry downstairs that's ready to go into the dryer, and I am headed to a meeting this evening, so I am going to cut this video here. As always, thank you for being here. I have loved catching up with you and answering some of your questions. Hope you found this helpful or interesting, if nonetheless, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.